Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Shaylin Sluzalis. I am an April board member and facilitator of the call today, and thank you for joining our virtual pre-conference session on building a movement for peers and volunteers. This is a three-part series, and we hope you can join us for all three sessions today. And please know that any session that is missed, that the recordings will be added to the conference website. So please be sure to check back there later today or in the following days. And thank you for joining us for sessions 2 on building a movement, peers and volunteers on the nuts and bolts of building a volunteer and peer support program. I want to mention a few housekeeping items before we get started today. First, when you scroll over the screen, a menu bar pops up. Depending on what device you are on, you can find that menu bar at the top or at the bottom of the screen, and that is where you will find the closed captioning for today's session. To view that closed captioning, you can select the CC tab on the menu bar. For sign language interpreting, you can find the interpreter on the screen. If you would like to change the size of the screen, if the slides are shown, you can select the line in the middle to make the slides and the interpreter larger or smaller. And we also have Spanish interpretation today. To access that, you can click on the interpretation button in your menu bar and also has a globe icon next to it. You can then select on Spanish. If you would like to hear in Spanish only, please select the mute original audio. If you have any technical issues, please use the chat feature and let us know. You can find the word bubble in the menu bar. And if you would like to turn the chat feature off, if you are using a screen reader, you can do that by pressing the Alt+H buttons, or please use the information and help selection on the conference website for more help. And please don't hesitate to let us know at any time for any technical assistance. For the question and answer time, please note your question and answer box is in the menu bar. Please only submit questions there as they may get lost in the chat. And to ask questions or make a comment, you can also select the hand option on the menu bar that allows us to know that you have a question. And for those of you that are on the phone today or using keystrokes, we ask that you press *9 or Alt-Y on your keypad to raise your hand. We will then let you know when you can unmute, and you can select the unmute option or Alt-A if using keystrokes. Remember, if you join into the conversation, please keep all background noise down as much as possible to allow us to hear you clearly. And if you're speaking as a panelist today, please keep yourself on mute when not talking so we can avoid any extra background noise as well. With that, I want to get started by passing it off to our colleagues today who are joining us and leading this session on the nuts and bolts of building a volunteer and peer support program. I'm going to pass it off to Linda Pogue and Kyle Kleist for this session. Thank you all for joining us, and please don't hesitate to let us know anything at any point in the chat.
Thank you, Shaylin. Appreciate it. My name's Linda, and I work at Disability Link, which is the Center for Independent Living that serves Metro Atlanta in Georgia. I no longer work full-time. I've retired from full-time work, but I'm very glad I'm still associated with the work at Disability Link, and I get to do nice things like this, hang out with my friends from April. Kyle?
And I have the pleasure to join Linda once again. My name's Kyle Kleist. I am the executive director at the Center for Independent Living for Western Wisconsin. We serve 10 counties in Western Wisconsin. Located out of Menominee. So think about we're an hour drive straight east of Minneapolis, St. Paul.
So the topic is about using volunteers and independent living. Kyle has an excellent reputation for his volunteer program. do you want to start off, or do you want to review the slide? Whatever works for you, Kyle.
No. So thank you, Linda. Yes, I'll start it off. So I just listed a number of different ways in which independent living centers use volunteers and giving some examples of our own. So, you know, we use volunteers, of course, in peer support. One of the things we're developing, as I talked about in the first section, our peer support partnership program. So reaching out, recruiting volunteers for that. Internships and work experience. We're very fortunate to be in a college town and have a real great connection with the rehab services program at UW Stout and their graduates. So we get a number of interns, even social work interns. Other ones I know, events and activities. Advocacy work I know is a big one. People are using volunteers. And then I threw in volunteer drivers because, you know, Linda asked me to talk about our experience with using volunteers. So we have a very one-of-a-kind, unique volunteer driver program that we operate currently in 42 counties here in Wisconsin. So over half the state. And we use volunteer drivers, and I call them volunteers because we reimburse them at the federal mileage rate. But otherwise, I mean, that compensates them for gas and wear and tear on their vehicle. But otherwise, their time is, they're volunteers. Many of them are retired. And we use them, we provide transportation for medical trips. We do a lot of nutrition, we do employment, but we also do social recreational. So we believe that, you know, people living in the community, people with disabilities should be able to engage in their community, be part of their community. So we do rides for voting as well, free rides for voting. We contract with our managed care organizations. We have a self-directed support. We contract with our counties. Here in Wisconsin, we call it the 8521 program, which funds transportation for older persons and persons with disabilities that the counties do. But it's such a great program. And in a rural area, you know, it started as we found out so many of the consumers we serve, transportation was one of their biggest barriers. And so from that, we got some grant money and started in 4 counties, went to our 10 county service area, and then kept growing. But there's a lot of time and effort that goes into it, which I'll talk about later on in using volunteers. So, but Linda and I wanted to throw it out to everybody once again and ask people, how are you using volunteers at your centers? What are some of the things that you're using volunteers for?
Yes, have you got other examples other than these on the screen? Peer support, internship, work experience, events, activities, advocacy activities, volunteer drivers. I'd also be interested in knowing, do you have a specific volunteer coordinator, or is that part of somebody else's role, or do you have something called a volunteer program? How does that fit in with what you're doing at the center that you are associated with? I just have to say that Kyle, you had included advocacy activities, and here in Georgia, tomorrow is the last day to register to vote. I don't know if that's true for all states, but certainly this is a crucial time. So considering advocacy activities with or without volunteers, tomorrow the last day to register to vote. So thank you for that. So yes, any experience with the volunteer programs or volunteer activities or anything like that, we'd be very happy to hear from you. Anybody got anything to share?
You bring up a great one around voting, Linda. I'm involved in the Wisconsin Disability Vote Coalition, and wonderful volunteers, individuals with disabilities out in the community. Really, and Wisconsin has been dealing with a number of efforts around absentee ballots issues, returning ballots, things like that. So it's been a great way for a lot of volunteers, advocates, really to network and engage around some of the voting issues here in Wisconsin. So wonderful example, and I'm just so excited about interacting with so many of the volunteers in that way. But yeah, so throwing it out to people.
Yes. How do you use volunteers at your center, or how's been your experience or personal experience of volunteering, or anything related to volunteers and independent living? I mean, how many times do we say, oh, there's so much work we could do, is only we had some more people. What we need is some volunteers. And then, is there somebody who's working on that? Are there groups of people working on that? Love to know. I bet the other almost 100 people who are participating in this call would be interested to know too. So you can put it in the Q&A or raise your hand and say what you'd like to say. You'd be so welcome. We really appreciate it.
And as Linda said, feel free to raise your hand and speak up.
Linda and Kyle, this is Abby. Oh, Shaylin, go for it.
This is Shaylin. First, I'll read a comment in the chat, and then I'll read a question that we have in the Q&A, and I see some more starting to come in. Shauna says, aside from what's on the list, we have volunteers working the front desk, answering the phone, greeting visitors, taking temperatures as people come in the office, and assisting with the intake forms. And then we have a question from Caitlin who says, how do SILs navigate the liability issue with volunteer drivers, whether it's to help voting or transportation to help get people to recreational activities or other medical appointments? And then before I let you respond, I'll just read two other comments I see here around your feedback that you're asking for. I see folks from Disability Network saying, I would love to hear approaches to volunteer recruitment. This has been a difficult area for our SIL. And I see Lydia saying, we use volunteers at the front desk to answer the phone and to assist with fundraising events.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Shaylin. Appreciate it.
Yes. So I will start. Yes, we do have an umbrella policy here at our center that also covers our volunteers. It covers our drivers as well. I'll be honest, I believe it's around a $1 million policy. It's really not that expensive. So something you might, I know a lot of centers are now have similar policies. But yes, and then as with our volunteer drivers, they also have, we require them to have their own insurance as well. So they need to have their vehicle insured. We need to have proof of that insurance. We check it twice a year just to ensure that they have continued insurance on their vehicle if they're going to be a driver for us. But yeah, from the center perspective, we do have an umbrella policy that does cover our volunteers. And that includes all of our activities that we might use volunteers.
The other question I heard was about recruitment, but I know that that's on the list to chat about in a little while. Or did you want to mention it now? Whatever makes sense.
You know, why don't we talk about it as we get into it? Because there's really a lot that goes into recruitment.
Yeah. So thank you for responding to us with any questions or ideas or experiences around volunteering. Shall we move on to the next part and see how things go? We can always come back. We're interested in hearing on any topic at any time, regardless of whatever slide we happen to be talking about. So 5 things to think about when using volunteers. 1, training. 2, staff time. 3, goal or goals. 4, the recruitment plan. And 5, connecting people. Those are the things we have. Is there other things that you would like to add to that conversation? Clearly, recruitment has already been asked. Are there other elements of this that you have questions particularly about? Ideas, questions, thoughts? Any of those are interested to us about volunteers. Thank you. Do you want to start talking about your experiences, as it's quite extensive, Kyle, with this list?
Well, sure.
Thank you.
So yeah, one of the things, so if we wanted if people had anything else to add, but really, when it comes around with training our volunteers, so to give you a great example, one of the things that, in great timing for this, last Friday, our transportation director, Bobby, her and our transportation staff held their annual volunteer driver training. So not only a training that we do, and it was in person and hybrid, but we open it up to other volunteer driver programs in our area, because there are counties and other ones that operate volunteer drivers. So yeah, we bring in over 100 drivers. When we look at going through a number of things, they just did a wonderful one on mental health, because we transport a number of persons with mental health. We are actually a crisis response, so we will transport a person to a mental health facility in a time of crisis as well. So we've done a lot. We've done ones on like bloodborne pathogens. We've done, oh geez, I'd have to go back, the number of different topics that we've covered. But we also do an initial training. So every time a person is recruited, whether it be for specifically for peer support or for our volunteer driver program, yeah, we have an initial training that we go through, whether it's our peer support staff or the transportation director. And a lot of it consists of the paperwork as well, but we also like to touch on the IL philosophy as well. You know, tell them a little bit about who we are as an independent living center. So we really feel that's important when it comes to training is, you know, not only are we bringing them in to volunteer, but we want them to know about our center as well. Even a little bit about the history of our center, not just IL in general, but a little bit of history about our center and who we are. So some of the things that we've done, but I know, Linda, you talked a lot about, I mean, the extensive work that you have done around peer support training for people with disabilities to be mentors.
Right. Let me repeat a little of those. I'm sorry if it is repetition for people who were with us on the last part of this call, but we're so glad you're here now. So yeah, peer support is something of particular interest to me. I think it's such a powerful tool that we have in the independent living world. I'm not sure it always gets the recognition. Words might be said about peer support, but I would like people to understand more about just how marvelous it is for supporting people to gain or regain control in our lives. So the peer support that I facilitate does indeed have that element of context, I like to call it, about IL history, how we come to be here, what is peer support, and in my mind, why is it so important? And then talking about practicing the skills of listening and responding with people, and other skills that are important in peer support, but especially listening and responding. Thinking about how to connect people with resources in the community. Lots of times people think peer support is just about connecting with resources, and while they're really important, without the other elements of peer support, I don't think it's quite so meaningful. And then the part of being a peer supporter is about knowing your own boundaries and building trust and issues of confidentiality and so on and so forth. And then what about dealing with critical situations? They are still relatively rare, I'm glad to say, but people do have to deal with some critical situations, and how best to do that. And then ultimately, how do we look after ourselves and each other as peer supporters? And that probably could be said for any kind of volunteer role, that we recognize that it's an effort, and we want to make sure that people are doing well when they're making those efforts, sharing their skills and talents and time and effort with us.
And Linda, I wanted to share a specific example around events and activities. So one of the things that we have been doing for a number of years, don't know if people in the independent living world have heard about Fishing Has No Boundaries, which is they're actually their national chapter is out of Hayward, Wisconsin, but they've grown across the United States. And what it is, it's a fishing event for individuals with disabilities. So we have been the sponsor of the Chippewa Valley chapter of Fishing Has No Boundaries. When we look at the volunteers we use, we've been so fortunate. So we have teachers from the Lake Holcomb High School, which is right next to where our event is held. And students from both the Honor Society and the, what is it? I always forget the acronym. It's the Future Farmers of America, one of those groups. Anyways, so when I put in the planning, marketing, coordination, they do a wonderful job. And we also have pontoons that we use. So we have volunteers that volunteer their time, volunteer their pontoon for the day. And one of the things that we really do, and one of my favorite things I've been doing for years, is I get to do the disability etiquette thing, and I talk about what is that? I love the old 10 commandments for interacting with persons with disabilities, but especially with the high school students and the volunteers, they really enjoy that. It's one of the little training that I do to start the day out. But it's just part of we also go over safety training as well. So we talk about if it's going to be cold out there, if it's going to be hot, making sure we cover first aid types of things. So that's just an example of one of the events that we do here at our center. And so I would love to hear about other events like that other independent living centers are involved in. I know we have another one, Mid-State Independent Living, that's over in Wausau. They do an adaptive ski event where they get a lot of volunteers and stuff to come together. And it's a really cool adaptive skiing event for persons with disabilities.
Oh, that's great to hear about. Thank you. And like everything else, when we do an activity, that's fantastic, just in and of itself. And then it's the ramifications from that, how people can learn more about independent living and respect for people with disabilities. Terrific. Well, we do a number of different advocacy programs at Disability Link, like lots of centers for independent living. In Georgia, we have a legislature that meets at the beginning of the year, only for a short while. So everybody has their advocacy days. And we've been doing those virtually recently, of course, and in person for many years. It's that simple notion that when we realize there's not very many people who actually talk to their legislators. And so when you do, what a powerful influence you have. And armed with that information, people do a fantastic job of meeting with their legislators, and we provide support and information as required. Some people are obviously able to speak eloquently on a topic because they've had personal experience of it. Other times people need some assistance, ideas and training about that, whatever the topic is. But the topics, they are so very familiar, aren't they? Access to healthcare, housing, transportation, employment, education, all those things that impact the cross-disability community. So we've had a lot of fun and been very effective, I think, on our advocacy efforts. Of course, we can always do better. Of course, we can always do better. And they usually involve our staff and our volunteers and consumers and family and friends, anybody who's interested in using their time and energy to that regard.
Wonderful.
So do we have, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add a wonderful example, Linda. I was just going to ask, we had such an active group. I don't know if people are tired after lunch, but love to hear what some of the different things that independent living centers are using volunteers for. Anybody would be willing to raise your hand and chime in?
I see Shaylin. I bet she's got something to share with us.
Mhm. I do. I see Maria has a question, and then I do see we have a hand up. So first I'll read Maria's question. She asks, do you consider working with partner organizations to be volunteers?
I would say yes, for the most part. And then obviously every situation is different, but we always like to make sure any partners that we have an understanding of independent living and why we are where we are and what we do, all that stuff. Absolutely. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, wonderful. I mean, we had just partnered with two of our aging and disability resource centers, and a week ago did a wonderful advocacy training for older persons, very well attended. And as Linda talked about, provided some really great skits on how to interact and how to talk with your legislators, things like that. So yeah, I would consider that volunteering.
Absolutely. I see hands are starting to go up. I read that we have Manisha, I hope I said that okay, providing an example on connecting volunteers to meet social needs during COVID. And I see some folks agreeing with that. Let's see if we can get Vicki to ask her question or comment.
Yes, my name is Vicki, and I am I'm a board member from Wyoming Independent Living. And I just want to speak to advocacy and contacting the legislators. I've done a lot of lobbying for education, Medicaid expansion, and disabilities awareness. And I can tell you that at least in Wyoming, and we do have a volunteer legislators, but they are so appreciative, and it's so effective for people to meet with their legislators, either at home before the session starts or to go at the session. And we have a training that we put together that we did for a support group for Wyoming Independent Living on how to advocate with emails and personal meetings and going legislature to lobby. And so it's not very hard to put together, and it's an absolute effective thing, and an effective thing to do that lobbying. And people with disabilities themselves going down to lobby is much, much more meaningful than me go lobbying for them. And so I would encourage every cell to kind of try just start that, and just start it, do a little bit of a training, and just go down there with a couple volunteers that have disabilities, and just talk to the legislators. And I think you will find some really positive results. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Vicki. I appreciate your enthusiasm on that one. Absolutely.
Yes.
So at Disability Link, we've done it in various ways, but we often have a general training about communicating with legislators right at the beginning of the year, because our session begins that first week in January. And then we might do something like a training on a specific topic one week, and then go and visit the following week, having received that specific information, albeit about the things that we talk about constantly. And that has worked. People, once armed with a little bit of information and the recognition that what they're doing is important, usually do a terrific job, typically do a terrific job of getting a hold of their legislators and having them listen to what it's like to live with the challenge, whatever it is, the transportation or the access to whatever. Yeah. And a lot of fun often. Yes.
I see we have Marilyn's hand up. I'll let Marilyn speak. You should be able to speak, Marilyn.
Okay. My name is Marilyn Bennett. I'm an advocate with a center in Santa Fe, New Mexico, New Vistas. And we serve 9 counties in northern New Mexico. There are 5 centers in our state. And you may or may not have heard, it was on the national news. Apparently we had huge wildfires that were very hard to control, and a lot of our rural areas were impacted by that and are continuing to be impacted. FEMA is a partner in this, trying to get the word out. But we recently had need of reaching out to partners in our rural areas, because the aftermath of the fires, once they were put out, is that people lost their homes in a lot of these rural communities in Mora and Las Vegas, New Mexico, and all the little communities up in that northern part of the state. Also lost their drinking water, unfortunately, because the ash from the fire burned so hot there was nothing left and it washed into the watershed.
Wow.
So people could not drink their water. So we partnered with the Community Foundation, one in Las Vegas, and then another second $10,000 grant to get water purchased for this. And as you can imagine, we needed quite a lot of water. We purchased $10,000 worth of water. So we
Wow.
needed partners to store this water and distribute the water. And we have an advocate who actually works, he lives in Springer, but he works out of the Las Vegas office for us. He was able to partner with the local community, and the Lowe's up there was extremely excited about being a partner in this and purchasing the water, which was a major achievement in itself, trying to get all that delivered. But then we needed to put it somewhere so we could distribute it and then get the word out. And the local high school up there was able to donate their gymnasium and forklift to actually move all this volume of water into a safe place until the distribution day, which was 2 weeks ago. And we advertised it. So we had partner agencies, radio, TV, word of mouth. The homecoming parades were part of this, giving it off a flatbed truck as it went down the street. But then we had a day where we had miles of cars just coming through, and we needed the warehouse staff to help us unload this. And there were about 8 men in this high school who were, the superintendent let them assist us. You know, they were paying for it. So it was wonderful. It was quite a very physical day. You imagine our staff is not, we don't do physical work. That's not our thing, right? At Centers for Independent Living, but we all did our part, and people were just so joyous about the whole thing. It was a very good community minded day. We also gave out diapers and formula in that same area earlier with a different grant a month earlier, because our families, we have an early intervention program. So we work with children 0 to 3 years old as well. And that's a Medicaid based program, which provides therapeutic services to families of children who are identified as having developmental delays. So again, we were able to partner with a local foundation to get that distributed to people. So, and as well, we teach health classes with a partnership through the Department of Health, and we are the volunteers. We're paid by New Vistas to do this, but the Department of Health is gaining lay people to teach these chronic disease self-management classes with diabetes and everything. It's a well-known program that's been developed by Stanford. So those are the types of ways we've been using volunteers. And of course, our parents and families are really good volunteers as well. That's a good base to draw from. They're always willing to do things for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. Those are some wonderful examples. Yes. I mean, you bring up a great thing that we look at natural disasters and how that impacts our consumers. And I know so many independent living centers have helped around coordinating volunteers. I mean, I can only imagine what's going on in Florida right now. I think of all the work around Katrina, but I think of the flooding in Texas and other areas that's gone on recently. So, I mean, how much that's impacted the lives of individuals with disabilities. And I'm sure the independent living centers many times have been at the forefront of working with volunteers and helping the individuals, our brothers and sisters out there that are being impacted by these natural disasters get back on their feet again. Other examples.
I just want to say thank you to Marilyn too for raising, telling us about the lots of things that you're doing, but raising that issue that Centers for Independent Living are good at responding immediately to needs as much as immediately anybody can in natural disasters. And so much of our work really is about life and death for people. So thank you very much.
Sure.
And this is Shaylin. I just needed to chime in, and I want to point folks to the chat and also to April's website. April does have an emergency preparedness and response committee, and we meet every month on the second Monday of the month, except for this month due to the conference, of course. And folks can register and join us on those monthly meetings where SILs and Silks come together to really share a lot of the lessons learned and good and promising practices and resources around disasters and emergencies. And thanks, Marilyn, for all of your work and sharing that with us. I want to read a quick couple questions that we have in the Q&A box for you both. Just want to read a comment first from an anonymous attendee that just says, want to give a huge kudos and shout out to know that there are SIL board members on this call, and thank you all. We also have somebody asking, for those who have volunteers advocating by contacting legislators and lobbying, do you send the volunteers there, or do you open them or have it solely as volunteer? I ask because having consumers testifying to legislators is great and needed, but I'm confused how volunteers can be sent to do this on behalf of SILs rather than us helping those in the community getting involved.
So one of the things I would say is that we don't lobby, right? As Centers for Independent Living, we can only educate, and that's what we put alongside everything that we do. We are not lobbying. We're not able to do that. Well, sometimes we have elements that can lobby. It's a bit confusing depending where our money comes from, but typically we don't lobby. We do educate legislators, and whether it's by testimony or personal meetings or getting somebody in the hallway, it's always very powerful when somebody speaks about an experience that they have personally that impacts whatever the decisions that the legislators are making. Always is far more powerful than any of the other things that we can do. So, and supporting people to do that, I think, is as our role as Centers for Independent Living. People may want to do that stuff anyway, or maybe they hadn't even thought that they could do that, and the center introduced them to the idea of being able to communicate directly. I don't know if that answers the question, but Kyle, do you have something else to add?
No, I have nothing else to add.
And I think this is Shaylin that also addresses the additional question, on a similar topic. And I think you really hit the point there, Linda. The question is around, since lobbying cannot be done with federal funding, how do you pay for the time you spend for training sessions and then time for staff to do lobbying activities? And I think you clarified that by education and information.
Yes. And making sure that you're using unrestricted funds. So
that,
yeah,
I was going to just say a simple thank goodness for volunteers. Marvelous. Yeah. Couldn't do it without you. Couldn't do it without you. So yes, Kyle, bring us back to some of the sensible things we have to think about here.
Oh, yeah, staff time. Oh, staff time is huge. Boy, I mean, you know, when I look at the amount of staff time that goes into our Fishing Has No Boundaries event, there's a lot of it. All around coordinating, and my staff are even volunteering their time as well. But doing outreach, amount of time they do outreach, trying to recruit individuals with volunteers, doing the trainings, things like that. And then, you know, when it comes to our volunteer driver program, boy, going out and doing the outreach and recruitment is probably 25% of my transportation director's job, along with training. And then one of the other things that's really come to light is background checks. I mean, so with our volunteer driver program, other ones, I mean, so we're transporting persons who are vulnerable with health conditions. So we do conduct background checks. It's one of the requirements as well under receiving our Federal Department of Transportation funds as well. But yes, more and more. So one of the questions I had for folks are a lot of people doing the background checks nowadays. I know that's becoming more of a requirement when we look at volunteers. But staff time is huge. Linda, I don't know if you had anything else, but I mean, You know, when I look at the amount of staff time that's involved, like I said, it's probably about 25% of her job is just doing a lot of the recruitment and training and everything that goes into working with our volunteers.
Well, I'm going to say something that's probably easier said than done, of course, which is we want to make sure that we're getting a good bang for our buck, as they say. So when people are using staff time to do that outreach, are we doing as much outreach about not just one activity, but the whole slew of things that go on about at the SIL, about independent living, about how other ways people might be interested in being involved, even if it's not about that particular outreach activity as such. So yes, being mindful about using outreach really broadly, I suppose, is what I'm saying. And that's difficult to do when you are busy and it requires just a little bit of thought and time and energy. So yeah. Other thoughts on staff volunteer relationships and connections, and how does that work at your SIL, or how do you want it to work at your SIL? Anything you have to share, we'd be very interested. And so, as I say, so will the other 100 people who are on this call. So thank you.
And curious about Linda's earlier question, how many SILs out there have somebody that's their specific job is around volunteer activities?
Mm-hmm.
Training, coordination.
Or maybe part of a job, you know, maybe there's volunteering but they actually have that as a job title as opposed to just fitting in with other staff people. Be very interested in that.
I mean, a lot of times with events and activities, it's kind of seasonal. So like with our Fishing Has No Boundaries, it's really, you know, not much time, but as you gear up toward the event and activity, a lot more staff time goes into it. And then how do you pay for that?
Mm-hmm. There you go.
How do you budget for that? I know as an executive director, it's something I have to pay attention to.
This is Shaylin. I see we have Manisha, and I hope I said that right. And she'll correct me if not. And I'll let you talk. You should be able to ask your question, Manisha.
You are saying that correctly. It's Manisha. I was the one initially a few years ago for the company, the organization that I work with now, but we had a volunteer coordinator. So it was an internship, and I did it through my university, and I was the one that coordinated everybody for all of the events that we had and went through some of the paperwork. I created the entire onboarding system for volunteers, which includes like all of the information, their background checks, their skills, their interviews, all of that kind of stuff. So that's kind of how we funded it. We don't currently have a lot of volunteer work going on in the organization, but I thought I'd throw that out there for others.
Appreciate that, Manisha.
Yeah.
Yes, certainly.
This is Shaylin, and I see Renata saying we as a staff work as a team and share this task, which makes it nice because we are all getting experience in this area.
Mm-hmm.
Great point. Share the wealth. Yes, when it comes to our Fishing Has No Boundaries, I have 2 or 3 staff. But yes, Bobby also, we have our transportation coordinator who assists with that as well. And then we work with our other independent living centers as well when it comes to doing recruitment for our volunteer drivers as well. So we have a great partnership when it comes to that. And here in Wisconsin too, we help to partner with one another with our independent living centers. We have 8 here. But when one of us is doing any kind of big event or activity, we try to help with doing some outreach and stuff like that if needed.
Yes, I mean, sometimes a big event is great, but it's also a vehicle in itself to promote the other things that are going on, introduce people to independent living if they're not already introduced. to help the community talk about disability and independent living in our language preferences and those kinds of things. It's educational in many regards. Yeah.
And this is Shaylin. I see Renata adding that they were gearing up to start a volunteer team, but then COVID reared its head again.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes, COVID has hurt a lot of our volunteers. I will be honest. Boy, we lost over a third of our volunteer drivers when the pandemic hit. And believe it or not, older, many retired. But the thing that I found most interesting, it wasn't because they were worried about getting COVID themselves. They were worried about giving COVID to the people they were giving, or they were the riders who had compromised health conditions. So that was their big concern. But yes, we are still struggling coming back from the pandemic when it comes to recruiting volunteers in general. That did that throw a wrench into things. Wonderful comment. Thank you.
This is Shaylin. I see Deanne adding in the chat, in college towns, does anyone call on their university volunteer services? The SIL I'm currently the board chair for has used the university volunteer services in the past.
One of the partnerships that we have that might be useful to other people is AARP. People wanting to get back into a work situation using the SIL to practice and hone their skills. Usually they come with a huge number of skills, actually, it seems to me, and it can be very, very useful in expanding the kind of services we can provide.
You know, speaking once again, being in a college town, and we have a wonderful program that, you know, I used to teach in for 10 years, the rehab services at UW Stout, but it's a wonderful program. We have reached out to them for doing different activities and stuff, but you have to understand that these are students that are wanting to go into working with people with disabilities. So that's probably why half of the IL staff are graduates of that program. But no, it's even the work experiences has led to people coming on board. But no, a great partnership with, we have a couple other universities close by. So yes, we have reached out to our university students in the past for doing some stuff. One of them specifically was around doing some cleanup stuff for individuals with disabilities. We're coordinating around spring cleanup with a couple other partner agencies in our area. So the university students were wonderful with that.
Do you want to show us the next slide, Kyle,
Sure.
to promote the next bit of conversation?
Yeah. Sure. One of the things that Lyndon brought up is really, and having goals. So if you're going to be using volunteers, have specific goals in mind for those individuals. And we've
Yes.
provided some examples here. So for instance, around peer support, you know, what are you going to, is it one-on-one? Are you looking for group activities? One of the things we found and I know, I hope I can speak for other independent living centers, when you're doing any work experience, internships, have specific job duties for that person, learning objectives for that person. You know, one of the things that anybody hates to do is volunteer their time, and you get there and it's just idle time and you're sitting there doing nothing. So have specific things you need that person to do. Otherwise, you're going to lose that volunteer really quick. Same thing when you're looking at any kind of activities going around. Have a lot of specific tasks for that person. Helping them with planning is a great thing we found. Coordination, things like that. Using volunteers to help with that really alleviates some of your staff time. And
sorry.
Yes.
I was just saying, but then people really need to get a good grasp of what the rounded picture is for that event they're planning. So that takes some time and effort in itself, of course. Yeah.
And boy, then when it comes to advocacy, I mean, educating persons on the legislative issues, I mean, there was a really big coordinated event. I mean, I spoke to some of the voting issues that were going on here in Wisconsin that was really impacting individuals with disabilities. And a lot of the coordination that went on in educating people about what was going on, issues were changing on a weekly basis. So having to keep people up to speed on what was going on, especially with so many volunteers really coming together statewide. So staying on message, those types of things. But if you're going to have volunteers, especially like on a specific legislative issue, let them know, what do they need to act on? Are you asking them to do it by email? Are you asking them to contact their legislator? What do they need to say when they're contacting that person? You know, make sure people are staying on the right talking points, things like that. And when it came to our volunteer driver program, it was really, we identified that need really out in our community. That came from our 3-year plan. But I mean, are there other things that you've identified out in your community that you could really use some volunteers for?
And will you be able to train and support those volunteers, and how will you make that happen? Yeah.
Right. So goals is so important when it comes to using volunteers. And it really helps to build a strong volunteer network when those people know that what they're doing is, and especially letting them know how much they're appreciated. That, I mean, I cannot express that enough. We have done so many, even the littlest things that we can do for our volunteer drivers, sending them a gift card, sending them just a little note of appreciation, saying, you do a wonderful job and thank you so much. We have even, here in Wisconsin, we have our legislative days where we get together and every center puts forward somebody as their Relentless Badger Award winner, we call it. And ours was a volunteer driver last year. So we really wanted to recognize and that really went a long way with our other volunteers to see how much we had helped to single out a person that many of them knew and just really showing the appreciation for all of the work that he did.
So all that you say, Carl, underpins that statement we made earlier about how the staff time is really important in doing this, not just the initial stuff, but the constant follow-up and support of people. Do you want to talk about recruitment and retention? I know you've had a lot of experience in that.
Sure. Recruitment. So how are you going to do it? So with our volunteer driver programs, I will point to that. One of the biggest things ongoing is, like I said, following the pandemic, is recruitment. So one of the ways that we found is social media is great, but depending on who are you targeting. So we target a lot of persons who are retired, not many are connected by social media. Newsletters is a great one. We use the Aging Network, their newsletter, the Aging and Disability Resource Centers. A lot of other nonprofits that have newsletters, we really like to recruit in. Newspapers is a big one. Newspapers, if a lot of newspapers, it's an event, it's an activity, something like that. Recently with our advocacy training, they ran a free article in the newspaper. Sometimes radio and television, especially if they're doing community events, things like that. We'll always do a free spot for you. Every year we get to do a couple free spots on our local television. So recruiting pontoon drivers for our Fishing Has No Boundaries. So, and then even Bobby has gone to, she hangs up the little flyers, you know, the little tear off things for our volunteer driver, explaining the program. And if you're interested, tear that little tab off and give her a call. So just some of the things that we have done, we found that when it comes to recruiting our lot of our peer mentors, we look at past consumers. Many times they make wonderful peer mentors. Other ones we look for in advocacy groups, individuals we're working for, volunteers in advocacy, that persons with disabilities that would be interested in working as a peer partner now that we're calling them. So some of the things we do around recruitment, but let me tell you, I told you 25% of Bobby's job is really around the training, other things. And when it looks at recruitment, getting out there, boy, it's another 25% of her job. So recruitment is huge when using volunteers, especially when you rely on volunteers. So let me emphasize that, like our driver program, when we rely on volunteers, there's that much more pressure on us to get out there and do recruitment.
So you're using low and high tech, shall we say, versions of recruitment. It has to be the whole range. Okay, yeah.
So senators, what are other people using out there when you're recruiting volunteers? What are some of the things that you do? Be great to hear from you.
Yes. I know you're doing some amazing stuff. Would you love to share it with us? We would love to hear it. And as I
would
say,
be interested in any ways that you could, the ways that you are doing some recruitment.
yes.
Ideas that you might have that I could steal from you. We are always looking for different ideas when it comes to recruiting volunteers.
Like lots of things at Centers for Independent Living, we can't rely on doing things as we've always done them. Life is changing, the world is changing. We have to remain ready to change our ways for doing things. Yeah.
Especially
Anybody?
at a time when the truth be told that people are volunteering less and less of their time these days. So we need to really target them and engage them when it comes to recruiting them for volunteering with different activities.
So Kyle, do you keep your volunteer drivers for a long time typically?
Oh, yes, we generally, we've had some that would have been with us 10 years or more. Yeah, you know, once we hook them, Linda, a lot of them really build great relationships with the person they're giving rides to. A lot of them it's difficult for. We do a lot of trips for dialysis, chemotherapy and stuff. So one of the things we've done in training is deal with bereavement. I mean, you're giving rides to a person for a long time for chemo, and then that person passes away or dialysis or something like that. So that's tough on a driver. It's tough on a volunteer. So when you have volunteers working with people in those kind of vulnerable health situations and a person passes away, I mean, including bereavement and dealing with those type of things in your training, I think is essential as well. Yeah, I mean, so it's been difficult for people at times. So that's one of the things that we focus on as well.
This is Shaylin, and I see some folks having a conversation around being connected with a youth leadership forum and managing volunteers for large events. And I also see Heather mentions that they have not done this, but an idea of having a booth with information about the SILs and having volunteer signups. And then we have a question around mentioning, it may be a little off topic, but do you do any interviews or vetting of your volunteers before they start working?
Yes. Yes, we always do. We want to make sure Bobby, our transportation director, has turned people down because she did not feel they were of the right temperament to be working, to be driving the persons, to be providing rides to some of the consumers we work with. So yeah, for a lot of times it was, or if they, if she, you know, things have come up in a background check before as well, where we've had to turn people down, issues with domestic abuse or anything like that. DWI, I mean, we only go back like 10 years. So, I mean, you've had gone without a DWI if you've had multiple or so for 10 years. So yeah, there's some of the, around those things as well.
This is Shaylin. I see Shanna is saying in the chat, our staff members have reach out within their inner circle, asking their church community, relatives, and friends who have acquaintances, and asking through local resources.
Brain, you bring up a wonderful point. I like to call it territorialism when it comes to volunteers. So I'll give you an example. We did not do a lot of recruitment for volunteer drivers in our faith community because there are a couple of interfaith programs that recruit directly in the churches, and we did not want to be in competition with them when it came to recruiting volunteers. So we didn't want to create that friction, so to speak. So a reason we stayed away from churches specifically, but now that many have gone away, we do some recruitment as well in our churches. And faith-based communities are a wonderful way to look at volunteers because many faith communities, you know, they specifically target different volunteer activities and opportunities.
So Kyle, would you say that you use opportunities as they come along with recruitment, or have you got, you know, sort of a timetable that you do on a regular basis for recruitment?
I would say it's more of we adapt on the fly when it comes to it. We're always, you know, Linda, we're always looking for new opportunities for doing recruitment.
That's a Center for Independent Living for you, isn't it?
Yes.
Seeing an opportunity, using it.
This is Shaylin. I see Maria asking a clarifying question, asking if, did someone say earlier that college students were getting credits to volunteer? And I think I can help answer that first part. I believe somebody had mentioned just reaching out to volunteer services at local universities, not necessarily the credit part. And then Maria also continues, maybe high school students wanting volunteer hours and would be interested in volunteering as well. This could be an intergenerational opportunity.
Wonderful. I don't know if the universities require it. At one time they did. They backed off of it, some of them in our area. But I know many of our area high schools still require that students do some volunteer time as a requirement for graduation. So
you have to be ready for them when they come, right? They're ready to volunteer. You're ready with the training and the connections that you'd like to make. Yeah. So what about that connecting people? Oh, Shaylin's with us. Nope. Yes.
Just really quickly, Manisha had clarified that internships that are approved by the university can give credit and depends on the case, class, and university and student. And thanks, Manisha, for that clarification.
And let me clarify that our internships we have with the university, yes, that's a course. So students are doing either what they call their field experience or their practicum with us. We're fortunate that we have the University of Eau Claire social work program where they do their final internship. So we get that student for the entire semester for 40 hours a week. So it's really great opportunity to, as I like to say, really get them steeply involved in IL, and maybe they might want to stay with us in one way.
This is Shaylin. I also see Shana adding in the chat that most colleges and universities have a disability center or an office on accessibility that will sometimes have people with disabilities wanting to volunteer.
And Carl, let me ask another question about recruitment or your experience. Do your volunteers bring in other volunteers within their circle? Does that happen or no?
Oh, absolutely. Wonderful question, Linda. Yes. We found that especially among our seniors, those that with our volunteer driver program, they are one of the best word of mouth that you can get out there. Talking with their friends, telling them about what a wonderful time they have. You know, some of them are only driving for us like 2 or 3 days a week, maybe for 2 or 3 hours, things like that. So word of mouth from the inner circle, as you might call it, is a great way of getting the word out, especially. And you know, one of the things too is like with our Fishing Has No Boundaries events, the students that volunteer their time really enjoy it. I mean, they have such a great time interacting with the people with disabilities at the event, and we have some real characters that make it fun for them. They really do. So the students, through word of mouth, they tell the other students, hey, we had a great time. So the next ones coming up the following year are more than happy to help out.
Maybe you have a volunteer for a specific event, and then you maybe, if this is not disrespectful, hooking them into the system for other opportunities to volunteer. Now they've learned about skills and independent living, and what fun we have when we do our important work.
Yes.
This is Shaylin. I see Cody adding a really important piece in the chat. He says, recruiting youth has been challenging. I think a lot of us are really busy with school and other responsibilities, and we don't have a lot of money to work with. And working more than a few hours a month unpaid can be a tall order for youth.
Yes, thank you, Shaylin. Thank you for that sharing that comment. Yes.
Yeah, and that does that does create a barrier too for recruiting college students a lot of times. Many of them working on top of taking courses, so limited time and being able to volunteer. So it's really finding that niche. Let me tell you, we found, you know, we recruit to our university students to be volunteer drivers as well. We will really take anyone, but we found that the real niche, so to speak, when it comes to those volunteers is that retired population. So that's who we kind of target. And that's one of the things you got to do is, you know, if you found a group of volunteers that you can really target, go for it. That's, you know. But one of the things I also wanted to bring up that I had put out there is, you know, when it comes to using volunteers, make sure even with peer support or other events that you're using people. Don't recruit a volunteer, get them trained, and then leave them hanging. You're going to lose them and they're never going to want to come back. So
you have to be ready for lots of different eventualities. Having too many volunteers, not having enough volunteers, yeah, balancing all that, yeah. So what's the biggest lesson you've learned in your 12 years of independent living and the volunteer driver program that you're still as well known for?
Probably the biggest thing that I've learned is, you know, recruitment is the cornerstone of keeping the program alive and well. Once you get the volunteer, do everything you can to keep them. Make sure that they feel appreciated, Linda. You know, I found that's the biggest takeaway. When a volunteer really knows that you appreciate the fact that they're giving of their time and they're helping, it goes such a long way. And, you know, that's really where the word of mouth comes. They will say wonderful things about your agency. They will say wonderful things about the time that they spend volunteering their time. It's just, you always want to let the volunteers know just how much you appreciate them giving of their time to help out. even with our event, I mean, we always send thank you notes and little gifts to the students and the teachers, the pontoon drivers, things like that. We just want to let them know that we're thankful of the work that they do. So letting them know they're appreciated goes a long way.
Most of us do better when we've had a little encouragement and appreciation.
Yes.
I see some comments in the chat. This is Shaylin, and a question also coming in. Max offers a suggestion to look at established volunteer-based organizations that have experience with people with disabilities, such as Lions International, and he shares a link around that, or they share a link. And then we also have a comment around trying to remind youth volunteers that this is an opportunity for leadership experience that they can put on college applications or a resume, even though it's an unpaid position.
Wow.
And then I see a question from Ashley around how do you guys support empowering consumers to find transportation while still offering volunteer and employee drivers?
One of the things we do is we really, we always empower people to find their own transportation. The individuals that we're generally transporting are people that have no means of transportation. So if a person has their own car or other transportation needs, we're not able to do that. We're also not able to overlap. So for instance, if it's a city that's providing a bus service, we can't overlap that service. So there's kind of restrictions that we have to deal with when it comes to overlapping federal funds. But no, we always make sure that the people we're giving rides to are the people that truly need them.
And in the meantime, always empowering our consumers to advocate in whatever shape or form they're interested in doing for the bigger change that needs to happen beyond their personal needs. Yeah.
Yeah, Linda, you know, we've talked about advocacy. Let me tell you, when it comes to advocating for expanded transportation services here in Wisconsin, using our some of the people that we provided rides for as advocates out there for increased funding for transportation for persons with disabilities and older adults, especially in rural areas, that goes a long way when they're telling their personal story to a legislator about the impact that the program made. It really goes a long way. And legislators like to hear that. They like to hear from the person.
And this is Shaylin. I also see a comment from Bob around, do you have bilingual volunteers and how do you reach out to the Latino youth and communities?
We always make sure to have our brochures and our information. We have it in Spanish. We have it in Hmong as well because we have a Hmong population in our area. And we even have it in Somali because we have a large growing Somali population in one of the counties in our service area. So we try to make sure that our informational is our brochures, things like that, information on the program is available in alternative formats as well and languages.
Yeah.
But great question. You know, when you're looking at volunteers, you know, make sure to reach out to everybody. So we do have anybody else out there? This seems to be a quiet group this afternoon. Willing to share any of the wonderful volunteer things that might be going on at your center? Or some of the things you might be struggling with when it comes to trying to recruit volunteers?
Or even getting as far as recruiting. What are you doing before that element? That would be interesting to people too, I think.
reaching out for recruiting people specifically for peer support as well.
So my experience is that in terms of peer support, anybody who's had some experience with a Center for Independent Living often feels that they would like to pass that on, share that, and there is your best possibilities for engaged peer support.
You know, wonderful point. I said my first job in independent living, Linda, was the peer support coordinator. My first contact with an independent living center, I was a consumer. So I had just moved to town. I was starting college and just looking for some resources around housing. And then just specifically my goal was looking for an agency that put hand controls in a vehicle I needed. Lo and behold, the person I had who was my resource counselor, they called back in those days, recruited me as a peer mentor. He's like, you know, Kyle, you're doing wonderful things. You're going to college. I think it would be great if you would consider being a mentor. You know, there's some other people with disabilities out there, you know, guys with spinal cord injuries that might be able to learn from your experiences. And they had me hooked. So that was my second role in independent living, was being a peer mentor. So,
well, for me, I contacted the center here in Atlanta because I was new in town and I didn't know anybody, not a soul. And so I was interested in getting connected with people. And so I thought, well, maybe I should volunteer at the local SIL. Maybe I will get connected. Oh boy, did I get connected. My life has expanded hugely because of my connection with Disability Link. And I did some part-time work, and then I got a full-time position, and then I retired. I had my whole spectrum has happened because of the good people at the center.
You know, and I look at just one young man I met back when he was 14 years old and in high school and having some issues. And so I became his mentor early on, and boy, I gave him the ADA, and let me tell you, he has become one powerful advocate after that. He was on our board of directors as a youth for a while, and has now moved on and is in grad school, and now on a governor appointed state council for people with disabilities. So, you know, I'm not taking all the credit for him being one hell of an advocate out there right now for people with disabilities, but I'm glad just being there early on and being a mentor and getting him hooked into advocacy, you know, was great. And he always points to me and tells me what a great mentor I was. And I tell him, well, it's, you know, now it's your turn to pass it on and become a mentor to somebody else.
This is Shaylin. I see some comments coming in the chat and folks sharing information and a couple questions coming in. Max highlights again that organizations like the Lions and others that have that sort of local brand recognition that can be a good resource in local communities, because they can also be instrumental in bringing independent living more exposure in communities. And the more exposure IL has, the more support it should gain, and so forth. And I see folks also mentioning how to leverage and utilize those partnerships with local university and college students, particularly around the language piece that we were talking about just a bit ago. And Jamie adds around maybe touching base with universities and their foreign language departments to see if there's any resources for translation services. And I see lots of folks being really excited about this conversation and learning quite a lot. I will read a question we have here from Maria. Maria is wondering if there are any volunteer/mentor training templates available.
Well, if you're thinking anything to do with independent living, you want to go to ILRU and their huge supply of training materials. In the previous session we had with regards to peer support and peer support programs, there is a list of resources for use when training for peer support. I'm sure those are available through the April conference website. Just a terrific range of possibilities, and some really specific things if you have something very particular in mind. Kyle, what about you?
Well, one of the things I wanted to point to, Linda, I included, a couple of the resources was a couple we had locally was our Stepping Stones of Dunn County, which operates a homeless program and a food pantry along with our United Way. Just examples of applications that people can put out there. One of the things we're doing is getting our driver application up on our website, but it's when you're recruiting a lot of senior people, putting stuff out on website or social media isn't real helpful. So look at who you're trying to recruit in that. But I can imagine that when you're trying to recruit youth or things like that, social media is probably the way to go, because advertising in a newspaper isn't going to get you much traction. So it's really hitting people where they live, I guess, when it comes to trying to target them for getting volunteers.
And if you're using a template that's been borrowed from another organization, do be sure to make sure it reflects well for what it is that you're doing. Asking needless questions doesn't go down very well, I think, or making sure it really does reflect the organization and the goals that you have in mind for your volunteers or peer supporters.
Yeah.
I want to highlight that. Great
Yeah,
questions and great comments. Thank you, everybody. Terrific.
And we are starting up our peer partnership program. And if anybody would like some information on some of the things that we've developed, I can put it out there. We put it in the chat. I don't know if her email is amandam@cilww.com. She's my independent living program director, so she could share what resources our staff have developed around developing the peer partnership program. So if I've just inundated her email, I don't mind that at all. As long as she's networking and sharing information with other IL centers, that's always a cool thing.
This is Shaylin. Kyle, could you repeat that one more time so we can make sure it's in the chat for folks?
It was Amanda M. So Amanda, first name, last M, at cilww.com.
Thank you so much.
She'll probably hate me for giving out her email, but I'm doing it anyways.
And that's the love we have in Centers for Independent Living.
Yeah.
Love through overwork.
And
No,
the power of peer support.
Yes.
I really enjoy the stuff that the staff have recently developed to get our peer support back up and running and just get it all reinvigorated. Like I said, changing the name to Peer Partnership, I think is really cool, and looking at it as a partnering program rather than like a mentoring thing. So I think they've really developed some wonderful resources. So I'm looking forward to our center getting our peer support program back up and going. But yeah, a lot of it really does rely on your volunteers. I mean, we talked so much in the previous session about how much people with disabilities had to give with their lived experience. So we need to take advantage of that, and we need to recruit them and use them as volunteers.
And I always like to think that when people get connected with Centers for Independent Living or independent living in general, that it opens up a whole lot of possibilities for people. And we can make use of some of those possibilities if we're in the right place to do that, if we've got our act together. And the other thing I like to say is that people really know, we feel whether we're being respected or being disrespected. And one of the ways to support our peer supporters and volunteers is to really inundate them with respect, that respect and appreciation. Yeah.
And if there's anybody else that wants to put somebody's email in the chat that has some great resources, feel free to do that. I mean, Linda and I talked about this, and we really wanted this to be an opportunity to share information and resources with one another. And that's what independent living is all about. I mean, we just learn so much by getting together and seeing what each other's doing, you know.
This is it. This is peer support in action. And this is peer support over 100 people in, I don't know how many states are represented here, but I imagine quite a number, and lots of different time zones all together working towards our independent living goals, which includes using volunteers and peer supporters really effectively. We can't afford not to, can we, with the things that we're dealing with? Can't afford not to.
Yes, well said, Linda.
Well said, everybody who's made such great comments and questions and ideas to share. Really terrific. I'm very, very grateful for being part of this conversation. Thank you for being so willing to share. And to you too, Cal. Thank you.
This
And
is
I just-
Shaylin. I know we have maybe a couple more minutes left, and just wondering if we have one more moment to hear from Andy, whose hand is up for a
Oh,
quick
yes, yes,
comment
yes.
or question. Go ahead, Andy.
Okay, sorry. I put this in the chat earlier. I don't know if anyone saw, but when you had, sorry, when you guys had the PowerPoint slide of how to connect to, like get the word out.
The recruitment part? Mhm.
Huh? Recruit, that one, the plan. My sister does a recording studio at their house, and I put in the chat their email and their website if anyone wants to use it to get a hold of peers and volunteers. So sorry about that.
No, please don't apologize. Help me understand a little bit more that your sister has a recording studio at home that they use for creating videos or audios?
Yes, video, audio, live recordings. So, and social media to help give out word on if you need help spreading the word about your business or.
That's great, Andy. And which state are you from? I'm not sure.
Utah, but they can, I think they can travel, so.
Wow, that's a lovely resource to share. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And I always encourage people, you know, find the free stuff, especially when it comes to recruitment. Any newsletters, newspapers, radio stations, television stations, you know, I believe they actually have a FCC requirement. They have to do so many like free spots or community related things. So take advantage of that.
Yeah, I don't think I mentioned this. I meant to. Here in Georgia, we have the Georgia Radio Reading Service, which originally started as, audiobooks, but have since developed into all kinds of service programs, and Disability Link partners with them with all kinds of, I suppose, public service announcements they are to the community who are print disabled. And we've made some very nice connections that way. Very nice.
This is Shaylin. Thank you both so much. Any last comments you'd like to share with the folks that are joining us today?
I would love to say a huge thank you that people are so willing to share their energy and their time with other parts of our community. Lovely. Thank you so much. It's a real joy to know that so many good people are working out there for what our goal is, what all our goal is, and that's independent living. Thank you very much. And thank you, Shaylin, and everybody who's helped make this happen.
Yes. Yes. I want to thank Linda as well, and thank all of you at April. I mean, Abby and everyone for reading the comments, and Shaylin, I mean, you've been wonderful at helping us with the workshop. So we couldn't have pulled it off without you.
Definitely
Thank you
not. That
both.
You should definitely have, you should definitely be highlighted. Thank you. Now,
Yeah.
we'll be back. We'll be back. We're not finished for
Yes.
today.
No,
Yeah.
Exactly. Thank
We
you.
have
That takes
time
me
and
to my,
space.
yes. This is Shayla. That takes me to my next part. Thank you both so much for this wonderful conversation. I know lots of folks are commenting in the chat that this has been a lot of great help in resource sharing and information sharing. And as Linda mentioned, this is not over today. Thank you for joining part 2. And we do ask that you take some time to complete the evaluation on part 2 when the webinar closes. And this lets us know how we can continue to improve and keep providing training that you find most useful. And thank you all so much for joining us. And a special thank you to our ASL interpreters and our captioners and our Spanish interpreters who kept up with us the whole time and providing access for everyone. We'll see each other again in just a short while. We will have our next session and looking forward to you all joining us for session 3, starting at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Pacific Time on the pre-conference wrap-up, take-home, and peer sharing. Thank you all and see you soon.
Thank you, everybody.